That's called quitting.
Scott, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep.
No. Okay, noting the hour and the presence of a quorum, I call this meeting to order. We do have a member who is remote. So I have something to read. First of all, please note this meeting is being recorded. It is viewable on ActonTV. Please note that under 940 CMR 29.10, 5, Scott Sullivan will be participating remotely during the meeting due to an illness or injury, geographic distance greater than 20 miles via video conference. Please note that a quorum is physically present. A roll call vote is required for any and all votes involving members participating remotely. Scott, as long as you are available, can you please take those roll call votes for us?
Yes.
Thank you. We're going to have a bunch of them today with our various votes that we need to do. Our initial first item presenters are not currently available. Oh, I'm sorry. First of all, citizens' concerns. Seeing no citizens present, we're just going to assume that everything is wonderful. Jumping ahead, we'll start with the ALG item. Our next ALG meeting is coming up on, one second. Is that May 1st?
It's a placeholder
Yeah.
meeting. We are only going to have it if the override fails.
Yes. So in case of the override, we have a meeting for May 1st for ALG. Nothing has changed since the last time we talked about ALG meetings. We, as a committee, have a tentative meeting for 7:30 PM on April 2nd. That will be held if the case that the override does not pass. May 2nd, thank you. If the meeting does not, the override does not pass at the ballot. We have a meeting currently scheduled for 6 o'clock on April 17th, which is before the special town meeting. Although, if the special town meeting starts at 7, we can make that be 6:30. I'll send out the details about the room when I post the agenda, I believe. Yep, it's in the high school. We will similarly have a meeting before the first day of regular town meeting. I do not have that location yet. We presented under public education being the next item. Jason and I presented at the school committee our point of view discussing the importance of the override and how, as you've all seen, if it didn't happen now, it was going to happen next year, and hopefully driving home the idea that this isn't if it doesn't pass this year, everything's all set. It's even without a request for increases, even the B budget requires an override going forward. So I think that was very well received. I got very good feedback on it. Everyone asked good questions. Okay, and 2 agenda items. Actually, can we start an item and then pause it? Okay. I'd like to start discussing the annual town meeting articles then. As we all know, there are a whole bunch of them. Actually, no, I was very pleasantly surprised. This is a much shorter agenda list of warrant articles than I have seen before. Yes, please, Marianne.
Just a quick question is, as I was walking in, there were folks in the hallway regarding the TIF. So I didn't know if you wanted them to wait.
I have asked them to come in.
Oh, okay. All
And
right.
they said they are still waiting for someone.
Oh, okay. Do you want to start with the annual town meeting, or do you want them to come in because I can get them now?
If they are ready, I would love for them to come in.
Okay.
I will start discussing the annual town meeting and we can pause it. I'm wondering so there are a number of consent items on here. I believe everyone who has one is present. Okay, Christine is not here to discuss the ambulance enterprise budget. Apart from that, I'm looking at items 17 through 35. Would anyone like to hold any of those items for discussion? Do we think they can be voted as a block?
17 and 18 are placeholders for collective bargaining agreements that have not yet been agreed to.
Okay, so we should not discuss those. We should not.
Not vote on those, because
We should also not, I'm sorry.
There's nothing to vote on.
Yeah. Same with Article 20, which is about the land gift. Although I have not, we just got the updated warrant, but I don't think we have enough details. Jason, that's you, 38 Piper Road. Is that worth discussing, or should we just?
I do not have details at this time.
Okay, how about,
How about we actually treat it like a consent article?
well, last time there were no details, so I'd rather not vote on it.
I also have an outstanding question on 25, which I don't have an answer to.
Okay. How about break this down further? Articles 30 through 35 are simply things that allow the town to get money.
We like that.
These are really basic, like boilerplate. The state makes us put it in there, as they do with easements and a variety of other ways the town gets money. Would we like to vote on this?
I think it's a great idea.
Wonderful. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved. Motion to recommend 30 through 35.
Would you like to make that a second, Greg?
Second.
All right. All in favor, please say, I'm sorry, roll call vote. Scott, would you lead us through that?
Sure. Dave?
Aye.
Greg?
Yes.
Christie?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Roland?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Is Adam or Christine there? I can't see them.
No, they're not.
No, they're not.
And I will agree as well.
Wonderful, thank you. So that motion passes. Julie, are you guys ready? Okay, we're going to take a pause there on our warrant list and invite some people up to discuss the tax increment financing warrant article number 15.
Awesome. So I'll just briefly introduce myself, Julie Pierce, Town of Acton Economic Development. So here to introduce Kevin Kuros from the Massachusetts Office of Business Development to speak to you about TIFs in general really quickly, and then Troy Gunther from Stonewall Solutions to speak about his company. And I have a few handouts, which I'll hand to you while Kevin comes up.
Good evening, everybody. As Julie mentioned, my name's Kevin Kuros. I'm the Central Mass Regional Director for the Mass Office of Business Development. For those of you who may not be familiar with MOBD, we are technically the state's official economic development agency. So we are part of the Healy-Driscoll administration, and our office reports to Secretary Yvonne Howe, who is the Secretary of Economic Development. So there are a number of regional directors spread across the state, supposedly 7 of us, but we're a couple people short right now, so there's 5 of us who cover the state. And our primary responsibility is to manage the Economic Development Incentive Program, or EDIP. And there are 2 components of the EDIP program, one being local incentives that take the form of a TIF, and then on the back end of the program are EDIP credits, which are state credits. So essentially the process, it's a single application that the applicant makes through our system to both the municipality, and I know you all have your own process as well, but from a state perspective, it's a single application for both local incentives and the state credits that would follow on. And I guess the important thing to note at this time is that our board has made a policy decision quite some time ago, several years back, which actually predates me even joining MOBD. I've been doing this for about 5 years now. But our board has made a policy decision that they won't offer state credits without municipal involvement. Okay, so we want a 3-way partnership. The business brings capital investment and job creation. The municipality, offers some form of incentive. Typically a TIF. Other things are possible as well, but that's the most common. And then the state comes to bat with credits towards the business's corporate excise tax. Okay, and in many cases, and based on projections I've seen for what's proposed before you all, and then I think the way we're looking at the project, the state incentives would probably be significantly larger than the municipality's incentive for this particular project, and that's pretty common in a lot of projects. But again, just underscore that without some local involvement, we're not in a position at this time to offer state credit. So I'm happy to answer any questions either about the mechanics of a TIF or just general questions, and I'm here to answer any questions. So
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Greg?
Yeah, I think one of the key concepts of the TIF, which will help the town understand why this is a good idea, because I think it's a good idea, is how you come up with the increment. This is not just a tax break across everything. It is over the growth over the period of the agreement.
yeah, no, you raised a great point.
I'm going to interrupt right there. We have a number of people out here watching who don't know what on
TIF
earth we're
is?
talking about.
Yeah,
Could
absolutely.
you please give just a high-level description?
Sure, and I'm going to use some hand graphics here, if that's okay. So, right now, the parcel that we're talking about is essentially a green field. Okay, that's it's more or less an open field with not a lot on it, and as a result, the tax revenue that is being generated on that parcel is at a certain level, fairly low because it's not built up. Right, the applicant is going to invest several $1 million to put a building on that facility. And then upon completion of that and issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the assessed value from that parcel will go from, fairly low assessment because it's just an open greenfield to now a parcel with a building on it, okay? So the tax increment financing agreement does not in any way, shape, or form impact the baseline taxes that the town is already collecting. So you'll never, collect less taxes on that parcel than you are today, okay? What the TIF agreement is a way of the municipality to offer relief on that incremental tax that came about as a result of the capital investment, okay? So if the tax liability on that parcel goes up, I'm making numbers up here, $40,000 a year, because I don't remember the spreadsheet, but if the tax liability on that parcel were to go up by $40,000 per year, if the municipality were to offer a 50% TIF on that, the municipality would still be collecting $20,000 additional tax revenue on that parcel, in that year. And then at the end of the duration of the TIF, it is if no TIF ever occurred. So the applicant pays, full fare on their property tax liability as everybody else does. Okay, so hopefully that addresses it. We have a graphic I think that we can make available if you need to see it.
It
but-
was passed around.
Yeah.
Jason?
First of all, it says that copies of the agreement are available on the town page. I'm not finding that at all, even though I'm staring at the page. Am I reading this properly, that you are going to be getting a 18-year TIF?
No, that's not my understanding at all. I believe it's a five-year
No,
TIF.
that was in an early draft.
That's what this sheet says, and that's
Yeah.
why I'm confused.
As the liaison to this group, I just got the spreadsheet. So this
So
is
what's-
new news.
So.
This is
copies of
Article
the
15,
agreement-
yeah.
Yeah, and at the very end of Article 15 says copy of the agreement.
Right.
I'd like to know what the agreement says and how many years this is how many years of a TIF this is.
It's a 5-year agreement,
Okay.
and it starts at 50%. And I can share the spreadsheet, which I just got.
I definitely would like to see that.
Now, Greg, I believe you had a question for our speaker? Nope?
No.
Okay, is there anything I feel like we jumped around a little.
No, this is new to a lot of people, and we're just here just to, try to, help explain the process. We don't advocate either for or against, a tax increment financing agreement. It's what's right, and it creates a win-win for both, the town and the applicant. Again, I'm just here to reiterate that we would love to help at the state level, but right now our hands are tied, that we wouldn't be able to do that without, some participation from the community. So.
For the sake of people listening out there, what I understand you to be saying is, for some period of time, it's as if nothing happened with this piece of property. We're getting the same income in, and then it sounds like potentially over 5 years, we will get up to what the normal tax level.
So if the TIF agreement is 5 years in duration, okay, for those 5 years, the town would not be collecting all the taxes it potentially could on that parcel, including the new development piece of that.
Yeah.
Right. But at the end of the 5 years, it's as if a TIF never happened.
Yep.
And it is like every other parcel in town.
And given that our general philosophy on the committee has been that commercial development is beneficial for the town, in part because they use fewer resources. There are less service demands from having commercial properties. In spite of having a delay on the tax income for us, there is a win for letting this happen later versus an immediate building houses and getting.
Yeah, and the second piece that most communities do take a look at is, he's going to create additional jobs, which means people coming to town, filling their cars up at the gas stations, stopping at the restaurants, doing a dry cleaning, that kind of stuff. So there's those secondary benefits to the community as well, anytime you have a job creator expanding in your community.
This is on Knox Trail.
Yes.
Julie, is there anything you think we should know about this?
I think you should hear from the business owner.
That would be lovely.
Great. Any other questions?
I'm sorry, Dave.
I'm sorry, let's see.
You probably can't answer it. So the original draft we got of this article is totally different now?
Yes.
Okay. So So it's a 5-year, not a 20, and it's 50%. Is it 50% for 5 years, or does it build up?
I believe it's a declining schedule. It starts at 50 and it gets lower each year of the agreement. Is that correct?
Yes, and the spreadsheet that I've just shared with everyone will give them that data, but the answer is it does decline.
Right. And just historically, I've been doing this 5 years. Almost every single one I've ever done has a declining schedule where the community, recognizes, the applicant has come out of pocket for a lot of capital on the front end, and they can soften the landing just a little bit on the front end of the agreement. That's almost every single one of these. It tends to be front-loaded with a, fairly rapidly declining schedule.
Dave?
Yes. Hey, thanks for coming
Sure.
and discussing this. If I could just do a quick example. So like if the piece of property would normally have like a $10,000 tax on it, and let's say there's, to use maybe your numbers is, let's say there was a bunch of improvements to the property and investment where that tax would go up to be $50,000,
Right.
so an incremental $40,000. Are you saying that, just so, maybe your spreadsheet details this, but like 50% of that additional $40,000 would be waived?
Exactly. So even in year one of the TIF, in that example, the community would be collecting $30,000 in taxes rather than the $10,000 before the improvement. Yeah.
Yeah, and so maybe my question for you is if, as you look across the state at these sort of programs, what is a typical? You said 50 is sort of the norm. Like, what is the average or aggregate percentage that is saved by the company or whoever's investing?
So the parameters of the program are pretty broad. They allow TIF to be anywhere from 5% reduction up to 100% reduction on that increment. Again, we're just talking about the increment. For anywhere from 5 years for up to 20 years. Okay, so the least generous TIF possible would be, we'll give you 5% break for 5 years. Most generous TIF would be 100% break for 20 years, okay? You're never going to see one at either extreme. Most that I've seen are probably 10 years, and oftentimes, if there is a common, it would be 190, 80, 70, 60, 50, kind of declining schedule that way. Okay, so this is a fairly conservative TIF, as far as what I've seen.
And just again,
Typically they'll average around 50%, and you guys are starting around 50. So.
yeah, okay, that was I think
Okay.
the answer is that. And then is a pretty fine-tuned question, but for this type of property and investment, would this be more the normal TIF sort of step rate down? Because there could be a large variety of huge investments and
Yeah,
small.
it's really,
Okay.
you can't really ballpark, or everyone is different, and as long as you create what becomes a win-win for both the community and the applicant, I mean, we're happy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Does anyone remember the insulate TIF? Do we remember the numbers on that TIF?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they were talking 20 years.
No way.
No?
Was it 20 years? No way.
Yeah, well, the answer is, yeah, this one is 5, starts at 50, goes to 40, goes to 30, goes to 20, goes to 10, and the total value is $22,505.
So I'll repeat what I said the last time the TIFs come. This is the right kind of TIF. This is the only kind of TIF we've wished to entertain. About 6 years ago, we had somebody come in and just ask for an outright forgiveness right from the start with a promise they were going to hire more people later.
Sure.
We will never fall for that again.
Yeah.
So thank you for not bringing that type of TIF to us.
Well, I don't bring it to you, the applicant does, but.
Just discussing it.
Sure.
Just making sure I reiterate my position and then consistent over the years.
Yeah, so.
And yes, I'm definitely happier that this is a 5-year TIF than a 20-year TIF.
And then just as a point of reference as well, the actual agreement between the applicant and the community is reviewed by our counsel as well, just to make sure that there's, it meets all, chapter and verse of Mass General Law. Sometimes communities fall into the practice of, hey, we did a TIF 10 years ago, we use that as our baseline TIF agreement, And there's sections of Mass General Law that might have changed, that type of thing. So our council will be, part of the review process for the TIF agreement. We have received a draft. It's in our council's hands right now. I've not yet received any comment back from it, but it'll be an iterative process. We'll work through, any questions that your town council has, that the applicant's council may have, and then mesh it all together so that it's legally very sound.
If I may, Madam Chair, question for Mary Ann and for the town. It says in here that the agreement is posted on a specific page. Maybe I'm not seeing it. Has it been posted yet? And if not, when will it get posted?
So you said, I apologize, the agreement is on page, and
So in
the particular Article 15 you're reading?
In the pamphlet that we have handed out tonight, Article 15 says at the bottom, copy of the agreement and related information is available at the page on our town website.
Oh, correct, yes. So this, as you can see, this draft is the April 7th, so even though just only 2 days ago, is that a group of us, just only about 2-3 hours ago, we were updating this. And as Mr. Noon said, is that there is a paragraph where we obviously need to update as well. And so we will need to update that site to reflect that when you go to it, the copy of the agreement is there. So we're updating the agreement.
Okay.
I might suggest that prior to posting a draft TIF agreement, for everyone to peruse, that maybe, and we turn these around pretty quickly as far as our internal counsel. It might be, good practice to wait till it's almost finalized. That way, no one reads something that might have been proposed by the town that, by town council that might be out of compliance with state law or something like that. I mean, do with it what you will, but we can turn these around pretty quickly, and that way you at least have what we know is a legally sound document for the public to review prior to town meeting.
I'm going to direct this to Julie. Julie, do you know when that will be ready?
The draft sits with us already, so our counselor is reviewing it, so we should be turning it around in a couple of days, and it'll be back in your hands.
Okay. Yeah.
So for this particular application, it says Stonewall is anticipated to create 20 jobs and invest over $1.8 million with the project. Jason's point, we've had TIFs in the past which have talked about some of these goals that they have, and away from the legal side of it, does your organization track these sorts of metrics?
Yeah, there's annual compliance reporting that the applicant has to do, and then there's the clawback provision available both at the town level and at the state level if they are non-compliant.
How often is that clawback incorporated in the agreement?
Not often. We have essentially, like, remember from grade school, progressive discipline policy. You might miss, by a job or two in a year, you'll get a letter saying, hey, listen, you didn't quite meet your hiring, objectives. What are you going to do next year to rectify that? And then if they're out of compliance by more than a certain percentage, and forgive me, because I'm not on the back end of the program, I don't know exactly what the percentage is, then you're actually asked to come in for a hearing to explain it, okay, in person. And then at that point, we have the opportunity to either modify the TIF, and things happen sometimes. Like, for example, we've seen situations where someone was putting up a large building and they hit ledge, and it took them 2 years longer to put the building up than they expected. And so they essentially had to forego the first 2 years of the TIF because they didn't even have a certificate of occupancy. Cases like that, well, the reason we didn't hit our numbers is our building's not done yet, those types of things. So, we try to work with everybody to make sure that it goes as smoothly as possible. But, rest assured, there is compliance reporting on an annual basis, and then there is clawback available, so.
Oh, so like this particular example would have in this compliance agreement, the 20 jobs or invest 1.8 million into the project or something along those lines?
Exactly. And usually, those jobs are not expected on day one. It might be,
Sure.
2 this year, 4 next year, 5 the year after that, or whatever the numbers are. Okay, and that's what we'll track against. That's what they'll report against.
Okay, that's interesting. That's helpful to know, I think. So, thank you.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'll share with you is of the 351 communities in the Commonwealth, I believe around 145 have taken advantage of the program. So it's a fairly popular program for communities to leverage to kind of send a message that you're business friendly and you want, to diversify your tax base. Yes.
Dave?
Maybe one final one is just the state sort of matching, or not matching, but the additional state funds which would be available. Not looking to pin you to any sort of number to that, but, how does that process generally go? I mean, is it so like this would be done for, and I'm asking just more maybe for the committee's
Yeah, sure.
education on these going forward, but if this project moves forward, then what happens at the state level, like to move that forward and see if there's what kind of,
So our board meets quarterly to hear, the testimony and to vote on both the local and the state credits. The next meeting is in June, so that's what we're targeting right now. And prior to that, our internal team will make recommendations to the board as far as what we think is a reasonable tax credit to offer on the state's side, okay? We'll take whatever the town, agrees with for the TIF. The range is typically between $5,000 per job created up to $15,000 per job created. We tend to skew heavier for manufacturing jobs, which these will be as he's transitioning his business from, landscaping to essentially, manufacturing of the prefab stone walls. So that would skew higher. And at the highest end of that range would be gateway cities. You guys are not a gateway, obviously. So my guess would be we're coming between 7,500 and 10,000, but I mean, it's not ultimately not my decision, but I think we'll be in that range.
Per job.
I'm sorry? Yeah, per job.
Per job.
And so even if you use the 7,500 number times 20 jobs, that's $150,000 of state credits in addition to whatever the calculated value is of the TIF.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Greg, is there anything else you think we should know?
Well, the rest has to do with the business model. And so my guess is we may want to hear from the owner because basically what we're investing in is somebody's idea for a business. Now, this is something I took an independent look at because this was my first warrant article. And so I've done some analysis of it, but this is really the owner's story, and I'd like to hear it from him first.
I'm going to hold on 1 second. It sounds like don't have actual language in front of us that has been finalized. I'm sorry for everyone watching, we just got the most recent draft warrant, and then this article is very different than the one we had. How far off are we off, Marianne, from having actual final language for this article? We don't like to vote on things that are changing. We have a lot to go through tonight,
Oh, yeah,
so
no,
I don't want to.
absolutely. I would offer just a little bit of guidance here too, is, most warrant articles are written in the form of authorize the select board to negotiate a TIF as opposed to the actual nuts and bolts and term and discount percentages. Because I think, try to avoid a situation where you have a TIF negotiated on town meeting floor is always uncomfortable for everybody. And so I'm not sure what the form of your warrant article is taking, but, most of them are along the lines of authorize the select board to negotiate. Now, you as FinCom obviously need to understand the finances behind it.
Yeah, no, that is true. Generally, there is a summary that we are willing to give much more good faith to,
Right,
which
sure.
includes numbers. So we are not, as a finance committee blanket, willing to.
Yeah, of course. No, I understand.
Negotiate on our behalf.
If I may, Madam
Yes.
Chair, I'd like to suggest that we could possibly vote on this tonight with the possibility that we could reconsider before town meeting if, for some reason, the contract language doesn't meet our expectations.
Other feelings? Okay. We're not making a motion, so I'm not going to take a vote on that. Recognizing the volume of things we have to go through and that there will be a good presentation at town meeting with an opportunity for the business owner to present. And based on what you have learned, Greg, do you think it is worth our while to make a motion and discuss this?
Yes, I think they have a viable business model. I think this is a win-win for the town. I understand we've been bitten before, and there can be grandiose things. This is, based on, they've got a sister company that's been doing business in Acton for 30 years. They are basically offering a product where you build the stone retaining wall ahead of time and then deliver it, which is not, a technology that, oh my gosh, what happens if chips become short in supply or whatever. In other words, this is a doable thing. And they are local. They've been in Acton all this time. They are also in Concord. I think this is a good idea.
Okay, do we want to make a motion?
I move we approve Article 15, or recommend Article 15, sorry, got to get my language straight.
Second.
All right, Scott, did you hear that?
I do have that, yes. Article 15, motion to be approved.
Okay,
And then
any, motion to recommend.
Motion to recommend.
Any discussion? Jason?
Again, it won't be reconsidering this if it's other than the 5-year 50, 40, 30, 2010, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay. Scott, please lead us in a vote.
Dave, I'll go back to you.
Aye.
I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Greg?
Aye.
Christie?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Roland?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Thank you. We
Madam
have,
Chair, members of the committee, thank you, and your line of questioning is spot on, very thorough and diligent. Thank you.
this will go into the warrant as a recommend. If there are big changes we see, we have one more meeting before the town meeting. We reserve the right to stand up on the floor and change our opinion at any point in time. So keep it in line with what we've seen here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our next agenda item is the special town meeting, which is happening next Wednesday at 7 PM at the high school. Terry, did you want us to put up some of what you sent, or do you want to just talk to
I was
it?
thinking that'd be a good idea. It's just Jason and Adam, they asked for a template, so I just used like pie in the sky numbers, based on some research on the internet as opposed to any hard numbers, because it's just a template to give an example of the type of thing. So I sent you some slides, and I can go over really quickly.
Hold on a second, Jason's going to put them up. Now,
But in the meantime,
reiterate for everyone out there, we're talking about
impact studies.
impact studies for any sort of significant zoning changes. There is
Significant.
zero, I don't want to hear the word MBTA
Thank you.
in our discussion.
Yep.
Awesome.
So while he's doing that, I'll just say that land use impact studies examine what a proposed land use change will result in terms of things like cost of services, revenue and taxes, cost of infrastructure, et cetera. You guys can read that through, and you can hand this out afterwards. Before and after, usually it's a worst case versus probable versus do nothing. They help towns make smarter decisions. You can go to the next slide. This next slide is what we used to do in Acton with major land purchases and with, a zoning change would qualify as a major land use change. This is done in 2001, based on Bill Mullins' brother, John Mullins, also the now famous Mullins study. And it looked at when do you break even on, the number of kids and stuff like that. So, and I'm not going to go over that here. That's just a clip from that study, which you can have. It is still valid because it's just math. It says, hey, here's some costs. You add them all up, and that's what things cost. So the next page, one of the things it missed, or maybe it consciously left out because sometimes it's hard to do things, so you leave it out for now, is cumulative impact on things like infrastructure and water and nearby property values. So it doesn't look at, if you do something in this neighborhood, how does it impact, within a quarter mile, within 1,000 feet? It also doesn't more modern municipal land impact analysis looks at things like community value, open space, affordability, risk of historic assets, environment, traffic, et cetera, displacement risk of tenants and small businesses. Next page. This is a typical kind of template for a basic fiscal analysis, number of homes, number of bedrooms, number of students, number of acres. Commercial, you can calculate how much of the tax is coming from, new tax revenue is coming from residential versus commercial. For number of bedrooms, and the percentage of commercial also helps the Acton Water District do their impact analysis. The impervious land helps with the recharge rate on the water, the wells. Protected open space is also helpful for our community values, but tax revenue down the bottom, percentage of each. I can give you examples of other towns that do this pretty regularly. Cars, trips per day on various main intersections. The next was just a zoom in on the REITs Prenderville study. So in case it was hard to see and you want to look at that. And then the next one down, next page down, is more socioeconomic type things. The affordability. So if you take down a $500,000 house and you put up 10 $700,000 condos, how does that affect our affordability? How many naturally affordable homes will be lost if this and that, current max and probable, tenant displacement risk, carbon footprint, historic buildings, all things in our master plan. And this stuff is not that hard to put together if the town wants to. The next page is a template for an affordability impact analysis, which is not in your mission, but I urge you to think about that. Again, it's like taking down certain affordability levels and adding on top of that. The next page after that is a page from the Milton impact analysis, where they decided to fight the artist formerly known as Prince. So my point is that, and they discovered in their impact analysis that they did not include cumulative and infrastructure, and so they had to redo some things. But anyway, next one down, next page down, some questions to consider. Will impact analysis help us make decisions for all zoning change or just major and significant zoning proposals? How do we decide on which zoning proposals to analyze? New York, for example, anything that's a block or over gets a significant zoning impact analysis. Just the framework for the scope of work for the consultant is like 80 pages for a block. Towns, you have smaller ones, often the staff do it themselves. And if we want to engage in such analysis, to what level of depth? So the next page is possible approach, where the staff provides the basic data, volunteer experts supplement, and the staff provided data. A lot of this stuff is formulaic, so you have ways to calculate carbon footprint, you have ways to calculate cost of services, it's just math. Volunteers prepare and agree on templates to use the data, so you have a subcommittee, they go off and run off and do things. FinCom subcommittee could do fiscal. Green Advisory Board, they can do the carbon footprint, they already got those formulas. The Historical Commission can do the historic asset impact. Real estate volunteers, we have enough of those around here. Tenants' rights group can sit down and talk about affordability, tenant displacement risk, and neighboring property value impact. And then review and discuss, of course, and get concerns from Acton Water District. And you got the memo from Acton Water District, right? Okay, thanks. And then the next one is, the last page is just, this is just let's just see what the REITs type model does, Let's look at, if you get 50 units, of a proposed zoning change, what happens? And then, of course, there's the grants. If you do or don't get them, who knows? And so this type of analysis, is it useful? Do we want to do it? That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions? Greg?
Yeah. Why does this need a special town meeting?
I'm
No,
happy
I'm sorry.
to. Yes.
I'm going to cut that question off. It's happening. I appreciate where it's, I want to make sure the discussion stays focused on
Yes.
the issue we are going to speak about. The select board meeting got a little heated in the,
But in 3 seconds, it's because I asked for this for a year and a half, and I got nothing. If I had gotten this data way back then, you'd have already had impact analysis, at least my cut at it.
Dave?
How do you ensure like that this data is objective, like, and just strictly, numbers based, and just hypothetically, if there was a template or something like that, and and I ask because all the different groups in town, I mean, I think you'd want to have the most objective information to put in front of a group, and there's some trade-offs with, I think what you presented here is in some ways, it's almost too much information in a lot of ways. Like you could get bogged down in so many different areas, all of which are important. But, it could just end up leading to more of a circular conversation. So maybe my question is twofold. One is, like, who would do this analysis and then, sort of provide some, make sure it's objective. And then two, secondary is, could it be compartmentalized in a much more fine-tuned way to easily disseminated for the town? I honestly, I'm not totally, I could see the value of having more information and more data, but, I'm also in the sort of, analysis paralysis side of it of, we could look at this a lot of different ways, and it just depends on how the information's presented. So, yeah, anyways.
Yes, so, okay. So the basic data, the basic land use data would come from the town. So they know or can calculate how many units max and how many units probable, like give us your best guess. People can argue about it, whatever, but we just use it. Cost of services, we have history on that. I'm personally, for FinCom, I wanted to show the difference between the socioeconomic stuff and then the hard-hitting, the fiscal analysis. So the third page in, let's see, the popular land use data, Jason, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 pages in. This is the type of stuff that the FinCom did in the early part of the century. And somehow it just started slipping past us. We just assumed that land use was good and, that saving land is good. And then there was this analysis that was done. So I propose that we just get this. With that, we can do all kinds of stuff. We can show you things from data that comes from the town as opposed to made-up numbers. I can go to GIS and I can calculate all that stuff and probably present something pretty good to you guys. But unless the data comes from the town, there's questions of, did you measure it right and all of that. So let's just get it from the town. This is not, if you paid a consultant, they would do it. But I bet you the consultant would actually turn to the town and say how many units would be allowed, how many square feet. I mean, they did the calculations already when they were developing the warrant articles, which won't be named. So I propose that just that data, so write what you got right there, will give us enough to at least do some decent impact analysis. Supplemented by some volunteers, people from this committee and that committee. And we know all these people, we know who they are. And, when they say things, we can say, well, we don't agree with that, or we do agree with it. But until we have something in front of us, it's just a template right now. I mean, I would very much like to show you something that's fairly complete so that you can see what the impact of your decision. Otherwise, it's sort of like, in a sense, this is potentially a quarter of the town. This is potentially a 25% of the value of the town, $1 billion and a half dollars, and that you're going to make the decision without any impact analysis. To me, that just seems like it seems financially irresponsible because we have the data right in front of us, and we have the formulas, we have the way that people do the impact analysis. It's just math, and so it's information that is not only fairly easy to create, but it's information that other towns won't make land use decisions without.
Now, we had this information, maybe not all of it, to my recollection, when we looked at the potential rezoning of the Kmart lot.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know we, as a committee, talked about it a bunch because there were concerns about the impact it would have on the school budgets, especially what sort of housing, how many bedrooms, et cetera, would be in there. Was that information generated by the town at the time?
I don't think so. I think what they did is they got, what's his name, down in West Acton to do the basic analysis, and then that was taken, and then volunteers, like FinCom, took it from there. So that's the same thing. So, but staff can get us that data, and we can do the same calculations that we did on the Kmart parcel.
So your proposal, as I'm understanding it right now, is that the select board have the creation of something like this that would be applied to various zoning changes
Yeah,
that come before it of
and it would have to
whatever
be,
they deem or the public tells them is of significant size, and we'd like this level of information.
correct. So that, if you did it this year, then if there's another one, you might update the numbers, but once you've gotten the template and the formulas, and everybody understands the template and the formulas, it's just plugging in new numbers.
Now, some of the information you have asked for comes up, or just in previous discussions I've heard from you, believe about this, having to do with stormwater input.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, but what you can do is you can derive it, so for example.
What I was going to say is that comes
Oh.
up actually in the permitting process. When
Right,
someone comes-
except for that, if you can't prove that it will happen because of that particular project, then you end up with a cumulative impact that was paid for by nobody, which is what's happening now. So all of these development projects should have contributed to the stormwater so that we would have no stormwater infrastructure shortfall of money. There'd be plenty of money in the stormwater fund to pay for all the stormwater fixes that need to be done at a town level. But what happens is that the little bit, that little driveway, add that house, all that stuff adds up, but nobody collects it on the individual project.
So what I'm hearing, I believe, is that you're hoping that this broader analysis would guide the town towards ensuring that those incremental changes?
Yes, absolutely. My whole complaint about bad planning, years ago, I was hoping that they would be doing this stuff and that would be kind of automatically happening, and it hasn't been. And so now we're facing, some very significant decisions, and I feel like it's time to start crunching the numbers.
On the stormwater front, I'm a little confused because it sounds like the planning was there, but the enforcement isn't necessarily.
It's hard to tell because I don't want to have blamed. I don't
Yeah.
spend a lot of time on blame, but if
But
you
it's important to
imagine-
know where the cracks are.
Yeah, so it's hard to tell where the cracks are, exactly. But what you can do is you can make calculations to determine if a major zoning proposal will make that majorly worse or not so much.
I see. Okay, anyone else have any? Jason?
Yeah, a couple of comments, since I did go back and forth with you on this over the last couple of weeks. But actually, before I make my comments, would either of you two gentlemen like to speak on this? Or Scott?
I would just like to ask, where's the cutoff on this? Is it every single commercial development? Does it
I'm gonna
have
say-
a threshold that has to be met?
So in the Kmart particular case, it was determined that it would be 200-plus units. I can't remember the number, 260, something like that. And so that might seem a threshold. I don't think that we have to make a decision now on what threshold we use for future years. But I would certainly say that if it's going to cause a new school need, or if it's possibly going to cause another Kelly's Corner in South Acton, I don't know. But that somewhere along the line, we've got to say to ourselves, what's that threshold? Not today, not even tomorrow, but at some point, to have a discussion about how much of a threshold, because it's all cumulative, it all adds up. This project, that project.
Well, it is cumulative, but we don't get to evaluate all the projects at the same time.
That's right, but you can.
They come up when they come up. And so the issue I see in this is, until we establish ceilings, or, what's our water capacity max, what's our, stormwater, wastewater capacity, then how do we know we're allocating it to the right project?
Well, the Acton Water District has concerns about capacity, about the
Yes.
3 zoning articles. I would chance to say that if you have a certain number of units and your intersections can't accommodate it, that would be a great place to start. So we get the numbers and we'll know, do we do anything deeper, or is that enough? Maybe that's enough. And that has told us that the threshold hasn't been met and that we're not worried about it. Because what this is right now we have a build-out that's allowed on the current land, according to zoning. Acton Water District can't meet the water needs for the existing build-out. So now somebody's proposing increasing, doubling the build-out. They left the build-out that's left. So to me, that's a threshold that's been met.
Still see some problems with implementation, and, if the last guy in has to bear the cost of all the previous guys who got through without bearing the cost of increasing the capacity, then you're going to say no to the last guy, when maybe you should have said no to the guy before.
But I'm not
So-
saying let's do it project by project. I'm saying quite the opposite. I'm saying if we're considering increasing the build-out, let's do that analysis now so that we have enough capacity, that we know that we're comfortable that we have enough capacity for XYZ thousands of units.
I mean, I don't want to debate it to you, but that's not part of the long-range plan. The capital plan doesn't talk about building out residential or commercial property, so I just don't quite see how this works, other than maybe with a very large proposal, because the proposals come before the town when they come before them by the people that want to do them at the time. So I can see some value in doing this kind of thing for a very large one, but I'm worried that we're just going to get bogged down in producing a lot of analysis that will lead to nothing.
Well, I'm probably going to do it myself with my numbers that I come up with, which, again, are pretty reasonable formulas that people use. I feel like it will be better for everybody if the town provides the basic numbers so that we can work off of those numbers as opposed to using my numbers and making claims. And then the town, like, why isn't the town doing this? That's the big question that people ask me. 400 people signed a petition, and they say, why isn't the town doing this? And I say, you got me. So you may not want to do the planning. I just want to know if you guys want to help do the planning, and if not, I'll just go off and do it.
Roland?
I think doing something like this without having some kind of threshold in place is a waste of time.
Hold on. This is a citizen's petition, non-binding guidance to the select board. I think it's unfair, just because we sound like some of us are heading in the direction of shooting it down because it's not fully detailed. It shouldn't be at this point in time. That's not the purpose of this article.
I agree with you. I was actually going to speak to that once everyone's had a chance to finish. Scott, would you like to say?
I'm sorry, no, I was just wanted to interject there, Roland. Please continue.
Scott, would you like to weigh in on this before I make my comments?
I'm good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to start by saying I hate non-binding citizens petitions. Again, just trying to be consistent, I hate when people say it's non-binding, therefore it's not important. I definitely respect the select board for saying that they will take up and honestly pursue any recommended citizens petition. I was the one that asked you to come with a template, and I think you've done a lot of what I had asked you to do. When you and I went had our last back and forth on this, there were the two sticking points that I had, which I believe have been mentioned by both Mr. Wellinghoff and Mr. Noon, which is what is the accountability? How do we make sure that this is, that we're all dealing from the same set of facts? Everyone can have their own opinions, but I want to make sure we all have the same set of facts. And so we need to make sure that we have some kind of agreement on what that's going to be. And then the second topic was how to make sure, the way they positioned it tonight is what's the threshold? I was coming at it from a second position, which is I don't want to spend tens of thousands of dollars on every single zoning article that ever comes up. So I do think there is value in this. I absolutely think there is value in this, because otherwise we are saying we're making a proposal and it's going to have some kind of impact, but we're not even willing to put a dart in the board on the impact. I like how in your template you have the max range, which is of course the doomsday range, and that's if the developers came in and built everything the minute they were allowed to, which is of course not feasible and not realistic. But it is also a mathematical thing that can be figured out. And I like the idea of having a probable impact. We're going to argue over what's probable and what's likely. So I think you'd probably be better off to have some kind of range. Or ask to identify what the first tripwire would be. And whether that first tripwire is we run out of water capacity, we run out of traffic capacity, we run out of seats in the elementary schools, we run out of seats in the high school. These are tripwires that can be calculated and predicted and then can be measured against this. So rather than having to necessarily come up with, this is what we think the range is, we can say, this is what's allowable under this new, whatever new zoning opportunity comes up. This is the first thing that we're gonna run up against, or first resource we're gonna run out of if this zoning goes through, and X number, if a zoning proposal comes up and you pick your first tripwire, I don't wanna pick on any one tripwire, but pick whatever tripwire you want. If we're not gonna hit that first tripwire till 80% of the absolute maximum theoretical build-out, okay, well, then our risk is relatively small. If we're going to hit a tripwire at 10% of the theoretical max,
Oh, right.
then that becomes something that should be much more apparent and much more concerning and should be raised earlier on.
But how do we get that if the town isn't giving us the numbers right now? We don't know how many numbers Powder Mill or South Acton Village will.
Don't go there,
Okay.
don't go there.
Oh, sorry, right. I didn't say the other word.
I'm agreeing with you, Tara. Don't-
Okay, thank you.
I'm agreeing on the idea that this is something that needs to be done. I'm also agreeing with the concept that we're not going to have a perfect proposal between now and next Wednesday. But I would like, next Wednesday's the special town meeting. But I am going to say that I like the spirit of this. I like that there has been a template put forward. And I would suspect that you are willing to continue to work to have a template, to come to an agreement terms. Something else that we probably need to agree to is, are we going to use the Mullen method? Are we going to use some other method? And before we even go to that level, I absolutely want to give the town staff an opportunity to come back and say, we've looked at a couple of methods. This is the method that we like best. Is it acceptable to you?
Right.
So let's have a little negotiation on this and move it forward.
Yep.
My
Right.
other guidance to the town staff, I do not want to hire outside consultants for this.
Right.
I do not want to bury the town staff either. I believe that part of the negotiation that we do with Tara and the other petitioners on this is to make sure that we have truly minimal information that we are all confident are valuable inputs to have. If we start getting a list of 200 criteria, I'm going to be against this. If it's a relatively small number of criteria and we can agree on it in the next couple of, collaborative work over the next couple of sessions, then by all means, let's do that. So, Madam Chair, I move that we recommend this article with the stipulation that there is not a final template in place at this time, and that we would direct all parties to try and come to a reasonable template within the next fiscal year.
Before we have a second on that, do we think it's beneficial to go into this with a formalized final template, or?
I don't believe we can have a formalized final template between now and next Wednesday.
No, I'm not sure that it is the job of this petition. You don't want to hand over a sort of a fait accompli to the select board and say, here, do exactly this. I think, as you were saying, there has to be room for the people who know more about the planning process, too.
That's why I offered to make sure that we negotiate it over the next little while and have it done by the end of this next fiscal year.
Okay. Do we have a second? I second. Got that, Scott?
Got it.
Okay. We have,
Actually, I missed who said the second.
I did.
Oh, okay.
Could you please lead us through a vote?
In room for discussion,
Oh, I'm
Madam
sorry,
Chair?
yes, please, debate. Steve?
I'm not against planning. However, I am not in favor of special town meetings to have non-binding,
I'm going to tell you what I told Greg here.
and you can tell me to shut up, but basically all this does is tell the town to do their job.
Ah,
And I'm not sure they're not.
Anyone else?
I agree.
I appreciate that this puts all of the information that the town might very well be doing in one place, in a format for us to understand and do our own analysis, especially having been through the situation of the look at rezoning for the potential rezoning of the Kmart lot. This is exactly what we discussed. The town might have the information. I know some of this comes up after the fact when individual projects are permitted, but I don't know how we can be asked to put forth any opinions on zoning bylaw changes of scale, whatever that scale is, without this information. Yes, Jason?
To that same end, Madam Chair, I went to the planning board meeting last week, and I asked for the exact parcel count. And I was told I'd get that information. I also asked if the parcel count had the number of bedrooms, and they said they couldn't possibly get me that information, which actually surprised me, because if you, and I did go to GIS and list out all of the different parcels that I could find. But what shocked me is when they said they couldn't tell me the number of bedrooms. That should absolutely be plan a record, and if it's not plan a record, it's something we can get off of Zillow and Realtor. Again, I'm not looking to make thousands of hours of work for the town. But before you put forward a large zoning proposal of any kind, basic information should be available. And so respectfully, yes, I agree. This should be done by the town, and this
Agreed.
probably is the town job. And it is entirely possible that I'm missing this data and it's available, but I have not seen it, and I asked for it last week. And I was a little surprised when it was not available at the time of the zoning board, when the zoning board was trying to, when the planning board was planning to vote on it, they did not have that information at their fingertips.
yeah, and
That
Milton,
shocked me, please.
oh, sorry.
That shocked me. And so therefore, I think asking for a more codified, more accountable view is not unreasonable.
Also, in other zoning-related situations, there has been a clear delineation, especially discussions around the sewering along Great Road and other things. There is an indication of the number of lots and what the effect various things would have on the impact of the groundwater, et cetera. So in my mind, this is in some ways getting it all in one place. I don't think it's unreasonable information, and it might simply be that what's being asked for, the result here in the end, is that there is a unified place that, and form that some part of the planning department, as my guest fills out, and a place that they post it, and everyone can easily see it.
Yeah, they did.
And that's why I said a template, because what I do not want to have happen is I do not want there to be one set of rules for this zoning proposal and another set of rules for a zoning proposal 3, 4, 5 years from now. That's why I wanted as generic a template as possible. So also why I said I don't expect us to have this solved in the next couple of months, but I believe that we should commit to having a templatized, repeatable, understandable way of having common information moving forward.
I believe we're going to be debating all those other articles, correct? I mean, just point of order.
Yes.
Yeah, so what we seem to be doing is trying to avoid the elephant in the room.
I am actually very personally, explicitly not doing that. I am trying to, ignoring, if you took all those warrant articles off, I want to know
No,
what we should be doing here.
fair enough. I would like to know what we're doing here too, but one of the challenges that we're going to have with all those other warrant articles that we should also think about is getting people to attend town meeting night 2. And one of the things I'm hearing from my friends and neighbors is we needed a special town meeting to hear this one issue.
I'm going to cut this off again.
I'm sorry.
That has nothing to do with our point, that should have nothing to do
Well-
with our recommendation to the taxpayers this meeting is happening.
I hear you, but that's what I'm hearing.
Oh, that is everyone's right to have, but our job here is to present, given the current information, our best possible financial-based recommendation. Scott, anything you want to add?
I will go with my prior statement that I am good making additional comments.
All right, Terry, did you want to say something else?
Yes, that the special town meeting isn't a referendum on whether or not we should have a special town meeting about impact studies. It is about whether we want impact studies. Milton got the information on bedrooms, the town staff got the number of bedrooms for the build-out for Great Road and the sewer study. There's like, when they want to do number of bedrooms and do the estimates, they can do it. And the Acton Water District can't tell you how much water they can pump. They can't tell you whether the zoning proposal can be accommodated without knowing the number of bedrooms or just an estimate. You know, as Michaela Moran said at the planning board, she's a real estate agent. You can use averages, she can use averages. And so is that what we're gonna have to do? We'll just do it ourselves? That's fine, except for I'll bet you that you guys would make better decisions if you had the information from your professional staff members.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I would like to have a vote now. Scott, could you please, Jason, could you please repeat the motion?
The motion is to recommend this article with the caveat that we believe that it needs to be fleshed out more fully and templatized during the next fiscal year, during this upcoming fiscal year.
All right. Scott, would you please take us through a vote?
Sure, I can go in reverse order. Roland,
Aye.
Steve,
No?
Jason,
Aye.
Christie,
Aye.
Greg,
No.
Dave,
Aye.
I'm going to vote in favor.
I believe that's 5-2.
That motion passes.
Cool.
Thank you, Chair.
May I ask you, I have to go to the planning board meeting and see if I can catch that. I'll be back if not, if it's over. But I hope that you defer voting to recommend the,
Wait,
Don't go there.
oh, okay.
any articles that have not been voted on yet by the planning board that we have not had the chance to
Got
review
it.
their meeting will not be voted on tonight.
They voted to progress them, they didn't vote to
Yes,
recommend.
correct. They have not
So
been
we'll
voted
do
to
it
be-
another night?
Yep.
Okay, thanks so much.
Okay. Back to-
Madam Chair, I'm willing to remove my hold on Article 25, since the town manager has graciously answered my question.
Okay. Let me get back to my list. Article 25, the septic disposal enterprise. All right, would you like to make a recommendation, since we're here?
You want to do a bunch of them at once?
I tried that before.
I know, and I stopped you. So I would move to recommend Articles 21 through 32.
So that is let me read this off. Prudent investment rule,
Yep.
amending the general bylaws for the revolving funds, revolving fund budgets, commuter lot and station maintenance, septic disposal enterprise. How far down did you go?
I went down to 32,
Okay.
insurance proceeds.
We already voted on 30 to 35.
Yep, thank you.
No.
Transfer station and
misheard that
recycling,
then.
enterprise budget, sewer enterprise budget, ambulance enterprise budget, transportation enterprise budget.
So I'll amend my motion to be, well, you can hold it.
So we'll
if you
hold
want.
21.
So 22 to 29.
All right.
Second.
So right now, we are just discussing, the recommendation is to approve.
Recommend.
Recommend. A motion to recommend
22 through 21.
Articles 22 through 21. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, debate time, discussion. Is everyone happy with that list before we get too far into it? Is everyone who has any of those articles have any concerns that they think should be mentioned? I know this is a quick pass. I do not. No? Okay. Then let's go ahead. The motion is to recommend Articles 20 through,
21, 22 through 29.
22 through 29.
wonderful, thank you.
Dave?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Christie?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Roland?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And I will agree as well.
Thank you. Okay, I'm thrown off by the fact that we have a new draft that I haven't had a chance to look at. Let's start with the easy stuff.
Well, could we, since we're still 17 through 21 on second.
Right?
I held 21, could we talk about 21?
Yes, please.
So, sorry, have my mic
No,
off.
please, go ahead.
So I'm just trying to understand what it actually is and what it actually means. And I know David's the select board representative who's here in our audience this evening. And David, could you give an overview on that, or John?
Hi, good evening, John Mangiarotti, Town Manager. We met with our financial advisors over the winter, and one of the recommendations that they suggested is that we adopt this prudent investor rule, which allows us to use a little more flexibility with the investments that we're making, and it's based on best practices from our financial institution, which is Bartholomew. Actually, our Director of Administration and Finance could weigh in on it as well, but that's generally what it is. It's just, our performance is pretty good in terms of financial returns on the things that we do invest, our trust funds and our other funding that we are able to invest. And without adopting this, there's limitations on what we can invest in. And we're not asking for carte blanche to invest in the entire availability, but we're asking to follow this prudent investor rule, which is a standard for companies and investment assets, or whatever you call them, that are considered prudent.
So would that be done by current staff, or are you going to need somebody else to manage that?
Our treasurer collector takes the lead on that, but she works closely with the financial advisors.
Okay, so it's taking money that you may have in excess for right now, putting it into a 3-month CD that's paying 5.5% or something like that, versus keeping it in something different?
No, well, not exactly. I think it's more the funding that we have invested in our trust funds is in a portfolio that has the appropriate level of diversity, as it should. This local adoption would give us a little more flexibility to potentially invest in some companies that we're not allowed to currently invest in, but are considered to be prudent investments. And we can have a better explanation from Teresa, or I don't know if you have anything further.
That is correct. So as John had mentioned, is that there is a current list, and I want to say either it's currently 21 or it could be expanded to 21. And whether it's like large cap, small cap, international, domestic, but through Bartholomew is that they do that investment on behalf of the town. And with that is that if this language is passed, it allows Bartholomew to work with the town on continuing to be the prudent investor, but with a longer list of choices. of investment.
Thank you.
Just, I work with Bartholomew on the school's OPEB trust fund, have worked with them for years. They specialize in municipal governments and advising them on investment strategy. I've found them to be very knowledgeable and get good results.
Dave?
Do you know what the standard is now? If they want to change to the prudent investor?
I don't know the specific concept, but we can get that for you. What standard we're held to now without adopting this? Sure, we can get you that.
It might be the prudent man rule, which I think is more restrictive than the prudent investor, and both require them to act as a fiduciary with respect to the trust and do what's in the best interest of the trust, et cetera, et cetera. But I think prudent investor is just a loosening of that, as you put it, just not nearly as restrictive as prudent man, I believe.
That is correct.
Okay.
Anything else? Would you like to make a motion on this, or do you want to wait for more language?
I'm good. Motion to recommend.
Second.
Did you get that, Scott?
I thought I heard Roland and Steve. I could be mistaken.
Yes.
You got it right.
Correct.
All right, so. And what I missed was which numbered item this is.
21.
21.
21. Okay.
Please lead us through the roll call.
All right, roll call. Dave?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Christie?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Roland?
Aye.
And I will agree as well.
All right, next up, GSM wanted to ask some questions about Article 20.
Yes, Article 20, Mr. Manager, Article 20 looks very straightforward. It's accept land gift, portion of 38 Piper Road. I unfortunately have not had a chance to ask any questions about this or dig into it. And in all honesty, I have literally one question that I would love your input on. Is there any risk of there being any dams or underground Superfund sites or any other thing that's going to end up costing the town an unexpected amount of money because we did not check exactly what was on this property before we decided to accept this land grant?
I beat you to that question. That's the same thing I asked when we started working on this, and that's partially why the language hasn't been finalized yet. What this ultimately will be, though, is authorization for the board to accept it under terms and conditions that they deem appropriate, or that it deems appropriate. And appropriate due diligence would be part of that. We're not going to be able to do that now, so it would just be simply authorizing the town to accept the gift. There is also the potential where this individual may want to donate it for conservation purposes only, and as such may be able to do so by donating it directly to the Conservation Commission and not even need a town meeting. But we would have the same due diligence in place in that scenario too. So that's a placeholder, but that's my answer to your question.
If it's a placeholder, do you expect it to materially change in the next 3 weeks? Or is this literally just an authorization for some future time?
Yeah, so what this will ultimately be, if it doesn't say it already, is authorize the select board to acquire by gift a portion of the land at 38, at that address listed, under terms and conditions as it deems appropriate. And so that will be the extent of it.
Okay, unfortunately, that's not the language in this article at this time.
It just says placeholder, right?
Yeah, it just says email from attorney Kevin Willis. Owner wishes to will portion of the town to the land to the town. So,
Well, what I just described is the current version of the warrant that we asked you to consider.
We're looking at the draft 4.7 version, which is the most recent I've seen.
Right, but I think what I just said out loud is the language that we would ask you to consider or defer on considering, but that's the warrant language.
yeah, I fear I'm going to defer on other things, so I'll go ahead and recommend, motion to recommend accepting a land grant with pursuant to due diligence.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to recommend and a second.
Scott's getting a workout tonight.
I'm scribing away. That was that Steve that seconded that?
Yes.
All right. This is, which article number is this one?
20, accept land grant, portion of 38 Piper Road. It's best to go by names in case the numbering changes again in the next 3 weeks.
Okay. All right, I'll do the roll. Is that okay?
Please.
Yes, please.
All right. Roland,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Christie,
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
and I will agree as well.
Great, the motion passes. Do we want to?
Let's jump back to the beginning now.
Okay, that sounds great. My recollection is that we do not generally give a recommendation for both choosing town officers and hearing and accepting reports. So we're going to skip those. That is the first two articles. The third article, actually, John, do we know if the third article, when we'll know whether the third article will happen?
If that's the budget transfer article,
Yes.
I'd want to keep it on here just in case, but at this point, we're not envisioning needing it.
Okay, this is the budget transfer from, to cover a potential shortfall because of the health insurance trust information.
With no numbers, we defer. I would ask us to please defer.
Okay?
Second.
All right, we have a motion to defer.
Does that need a motion?
It wasn't really, could you please make a motion?
But do we need a motion if we're just not gonna,
Okay,
because there's a possibility they're gonna come to us between now and the night of the meeting, in which case we will vote on it then. So for now, if we just don't say anything at all, it's deferred.
defer means we can always change our mind, but defer means,
Right. But if we say nothing at all, it's a pocket defer. We should vote on recommendation, no recommendation, or not recommended. And the
Okay.
defer, we just let roll.
okay. I just want them to write defer in the warrant.
Selectmen recommend.
Without a number? Okay. I will
Do we have-
keep my incredulity to
I
myself.
think we don't in fact have a motion.
No, we don't.
Okay. So are we all comfortable with deferring this?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, just making sure. I agree. Town operating budget. I believe we already voted on this? Back when we did our budget hearing. We voted to recommend back when we had our budget hearing. We recommended it. I'm just happy. One more article down. Okay, Jason, town capital, public works, public safety, and public celebrations.
Amazing how quickly my words come back to me. I said I'd be deferring other articles because I was unprepared for tonight, and this is one such article. So I do not have enough information at this time to come to the committee. I'm afraid we're going to have to kick it until the pre-town meeting. I would just like to say that I find it unfortunate and this is not, it's not any one person's fault. I do think it's unfortunate that we received the draft warrant with only one meeting prior to it. So I will do my very best to get my ducks in a row on Article 5 as soon as possible.
Did you want to say something, Joe?
Just that I'm available to answer any questions about the capital plan. It's the same one that we've been discussing for the last few months. Hasn't changed.
Understood. I will be following up with you in the next couple of days. Thank you.
Christine has the next article, which is Town Capital Infrastructure Design and Construction Borrowing. She is unavailable tonight, so we will also be deferring that. Scott, would you like to discuss the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District budget? Maybe make a motion?
I would make a motion to accept
Recommend?
recommend this. Sorry, wrong terminology.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All right. Discussion.
I believe, just like with the town budget and the school budget and the ALG process, that is what I was going to say, but I
Yes.
said to soften my language. Thank you. So I do believe we're good to go.
Yeah. For anyone who's watching, if you're new to this process, specifically for the budgets that we will be discussing, we have had so many discussions over the course of time about these individual budgets. We are not, in fact, rubber stamping them. We're simply not repeating the various discussions we've already had. So we have a motion and a second. Scott, would you lead us through a vote, please?
Sure. Dave,
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
Christie,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Roland,
Aye.
and I agree as well.
Next up is the Minuteman Regional School District Assessment. Steve?
Yeah, that one's mine. So the total spending, as you may recall, for Minuteman went up about 4%. Most of that being in capital. The operating budget went up 3%. Non-assessment revenue, like Chapter 70 facilities rental, Chapter 71 was up significantly. So the member assessments for Minuteman only went up by less than 1%, 0.82. Our assessment is, of course, going up by much more than that, 9.6. And when I analyze the numbers, basically 8.7 of the 9.6 is just due to the enrollment growth from Acton. The remainder, 0.8, is just the assessment growth. So as I see it, for us, Minuteman is just it's a cost of the success of them recruiting students from Acton. And so I would recommend this article.
Second, anyone?
Second.
Any discussion? The enrollment has effectively leveled off, so we shouldn't see the large jumps that we have seen separate from these budgetary increases.
I believe the school's at capacity, so they can't take any more.
Oh, they can. They're working.
Okay. Scott, would you take us through a vote, please?
Sure. Dave,
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
Christie,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Roland,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well.
And the motion passes. Thank you. Next up is the Community Preservation Program. Roland, the article we have here says it's a draft from March 28th. Do you know if this is the version we should be talking about?
I haven't seen any updates since then. I can follow up. Maybe we should hold off on this one, just because we don't have the, unless John can speak to it.
Yes, John?
Hi, just like the capital article, this hasn't changed since it was approved and recommended by the Community Preservation Committee.
Oh, okay, so it has been approved by them.
It was, yeah, this is their recommendation.
Wonderful.
So I motion that we recommend the Community Preservation Program direct appropriations from fund balances.
Second.
Is there
All
anything?
right.
Hold on a second, Scott. Is there anything, it's time for discussion.
Just making sure I don't see any Sapporo.
Yeah, is there anything in here that you would like to call to our attention, Roland?
No, not at this time. I think everything looks pretty much standard as to what we've had before. There, okay, it's at the tip service. No, I'm good with everything that's on here right now. I will point out one thing, Regional Housing Services Program, which is sub-article L in this one. A few years ago, especially when I was on the committee back, now 10 years ago, used to be recommended in 2-year slots. So it'd be 80,000, it's a 2-year appropriation. Now, in the last couple of years, they've gone to doing this yearly. So that, if they hold true to that, that'll still be coming up every year. And it does provide a lot of bang for the buck in that, and it also frees up town staff time to do their jobs here and not have to administer this. And a lot of it was done through Nancy Tavernier, who is, up there right now and can't dedicate the amount of time to it. So that is a great service to the town. So I do recommend this article.
Dave?
Spending appropriations C, the dog park. If I recall, when they presented several years ago, that they swore that was the extent of the funding needed for that space. I think that was 25,000 or something like that. We didn't discuss at the time, like, what we thought about it coming from the town budget or CPC, but here it is. My understanding was this was the ball was going to be picked up and ran after that meeting, and no more money from the town was needed.
Yeah, I remember something about there being a grant involved.
Yeah.
There is a grant on this one. They has received $225,000 from Stanton. Have 40,000 private donations. The remaining items to be funded by the 100,000 appropriation, accessible water fountains, benches, solar lights, and maintenance shed, dog waste station, trash barrels, additional funding for design. I thought myself the design was already completed.
It sounds like the scope of what they're doing has grown beyond what we were initially
I think that's the issue.
told.
Yeah.
It is one of those things that tweaks me when we're told something is all set and it won't cost more, and then it ends up in a few years they come and ask for money. Is this the sort of thing people would like to pull out? We have it once before, not recommended a certain item. So we have the option of doing that if we are so inclined. We can also invite someone from the CPC in or someone from the dog park committee to come speak to this at our next meeting.
So I don't want to vote it down because I'd like to know more information about it, but I wouldn't be against us recommending everything but subsection C and asking them to come and speak to us between now and town meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe we have a motion which this would change.
I can amend it.
You can amend it?
Yeah,
Okay.
so, motion to approve all items under this article, except for right now, subsection C, Acton Community Dog Park.
Second agrees to the amendment.
All right. Unless there's more discussion, we'll go ahead to the vote. Does that sound good, Scott?
All right, so voting. Dave?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Christie?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Roland?
Aye.
And I'm in agreement.
Next up is to vehicle sales and rental, amend the zoning bylaw. Greg, this is you.
Yeah, I need to do more due diligence on this, so if we can wait until our next meeting.
I'm
Jason?
all for deferring it. I would just like to ask, if I may, when you do your due diligence on this, this feels to me like one of those instances where in the desire to do the quote-unquote right thing, we end up being less amenable to businesses, and therefore it's the type of thing that would be right up your EDC alley.
Your vibe is similar to my vibe.
Very good, then I will leave you be to track it down.
Because I did listen to the presentation of the early version of this to the select board. And it does seem to be weird that we're going to make it harder for businesses to do business on 2A at a time when we are also trying to do some economic development down near Knox Trail.
We are in rare, complete agreement.
My understanding is that this is not stopping them from happening. It's simply saying there has to be a special permit process.
Correct.
But we can defer this discussion. We want to be careful of not deferring too much such that the next meeting becomes
Understood.
horrible. And it's, people like to have something in there, but we also don't want to rush them. Mr. Martin?
Madam Chair, I happen to be the select board member assigned to this one. I'm happy to answer any questions, or I could give you a summary or whatever you'd like.
What would we like? Your call, Greg.
Sure. Otherwise, I can do my due diligence and we can talk about this later. But the questions that I've got here are, there were a variety of proposals that were floated that said we might do it through part of 2A, and did any of that get resolved? Because I look through the version of the warrant that we get tonight, and all I see is a lot of letters and numbers. I don't see any narrative.
I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in here for a second. Do you have access to the slides? I assume it's the parcels listed in the planning board presentation that you gave.
That's correct. It was only 3 slides.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's, I am happy to bring that up if that would help. But I don't know where to find those.
They're so short, Madam Chair, I can just speak to them because it's very, very simple.
Okay, there is a map with these specific parcels.
So it, basically, just, I can do this, I think, in like 4 sentences. After the Nagog Park one, the select board got a lot of feedback that saying that we needed to control more where car dealerships went. So the select board did a discussion. The planning board gave the select board 2 options. One was to restrict car dealerships in part of Great Road, and the other one is not to change where they could go, but just to require a special permit for any place that they could go. So the final proposal in the change in zoning just requires special permit for car dealerships on Great Road, same areas where they can go now, no change in that. Car dealerships, whether they're indoor or outdoor display, and whether they're rental or for sale.
I'm just going to see if I can pull up that map if you'd like. Are there any other questions, or do you still like to defer?
I would still like to defer because the concern that I have is this indoor-outdoor display, because that was one of the issues that was discussed at the initial presentation, and the methodology of the survey that led people to propose that seemed a little sketchy. I know the sample was 600, but it was not a representative sample. The questions did not explain the trade-offs. They gave people multiple choice items, and so it is not clear to me that basically all the issues have been resolved. So I would still like to defer this.
Okay. If you look at the agenda, the posted agenda for the planning board's, let me tell you the exact date, April 2nd meeting, their packet has a presentation called Zoning for Auto Dealerships on Great Road, presented by Mr. Martin, that has the map in it that you were wondering about, shows exactly the parcels.
Good.
But we can defer this discussion further until our August 23rd meeting. Sorry, I got in way too late last night. trying to skip over everything. You know, that's my anniversary. I should know that date. Okay. Moving on to the next article item.
The dog ate my homework.
Okay.
I was planning to do due diligence on this yesterday, and then this eclipse thing happened.
Okay, MBTA overlay, the planning board is voting right now, so they have not made their recommendation as of, well, they were meeting at 7:30 today. So we will have to learn about that and discuss this one next time. How about the South Acton Village districts? Adam is not here. Would anyone else like to take a lead on discussing this, or should we defer it? Okay, next meeting's getting long. Just put that in everyone's head, because it's going to be a big discussion about, I just want to make sure we balance that, having enough time to have good discussions on things. All right, next up, Dave, authorized long-term lease for 19 and 21 Maple Street.
Yeah, so this one is, the term, the wording is not a part of it right now, but essentially this is the Richards property that the town purchased, was authorized to purchase in 2019, which is those two lots. It's adjacent on the other side of the tracks, but from the main commuter lot, but also in the general vicinity of train access. And the idea at the time was to purchase this property to discuss what sort of parking improvements could be done, and potentially for some sort of shops or breakfast nooks, et cetera, that could serve folks commuting in. And this, as I noted, was 2019. So since then, the property, I think, has been, partially occupied by folks in the town, et cetera. And the town is now, was authorized in 2019 to enter into up to a 3-year lease for the property. And this warrant article would look to authorize a longer-term lease. My understanding is there's a potential tenant in the Acton Food Pantry who would be looking to lease this space for up to 10 years. And at that point, we would have a tenant there. And I had a conversation with Corey and some folks with the town today just about parking in general around the train station. And, there's a couple of these satellite lots behind the fire station, next to the church, by Jones Field, that are generally unutilized or severely underutilized. There's folks using them for the dog park sort of area back there, the general park, the church, or for Jones just to access the playground there. But long story short, we don't have nearly the need for commuter rail parking as we did. So from that perspective, I think this makes sense. John, I may have a question for you in just a second, but when we bought the property, we purchased it for $1.1 million, and we entered into a 20-year borrowing at a rate at about 4.25%. And so there's some interest on that borrowing that is paid annually out of the commuter rail lot fund. The fund itself is generally, at roughly half the sort of revenue that it was in the 2019 sort of timeframe, a little above that. But it varies, and, the utilization generally increases in the middle of the week and much less on the Fridays and Mondays of the world. But long story short, the debt is being serviced for that lot currently from the commuter rail. So, I'm certainly supportive of getting a tenant into the property, and I think it makes sense to have a longer-term lease here. And I'm not going to, debate, the future parking uses, et cetera, or whatever we may have dreamt for it. But I was wondering, about this debt, which is being serviced by the commuter rail lot, and maybe the town manager could help us understand just, the structure of a lease, and maybe where rates are in the market now, and how that would be there to service the current borrowing on it, and if there's just some sense of revenue generation for the lease, et cetera, and how that would be utilized.
John, could you please answer? Or
Thank you. Yeah, so the debt service is paid from parking lot revenues, which have been slow, but we expect them to pick back up. And that would be the primary source for paying back that debt. There is a proposed lease, although there isn't a substantial rent that's being proposed, given the substantial renovations that are going to be undertaken by the tenant. And so we do also receive revenue from an ambulance company that rents space in there on an annual basis. And so, our obligation is to pay back that debt, and we'll do that using the parking lot revenues going forward. And to the extent that this lease helps with that, that would be great. But we're not relying on the building revenue to pay that back to debt. The parking will be able to do that.
Okay, and then, so can you talk a little bit more just about that? Is the idea that the new tenant would spend, I'll make up numbers, but hundreds of thousands of dollars to update the building or to repave the lot or redesign the lot, et cetera? And that investment, in theory, would go to the town at the end of the lease term unless they renewed the lease. But it sounds like the rent, the actual lease payment would be de minimis, is that right?
Yeah, so the town issued an RFP over the winter, and we received a few responses. There's going to be a presentation at the end of this month from the food pantry, which is the recommended tenant. And we would work to negotiate a lease with them between now and then and likely into the spring. So this request of town meeting is not to lease the space. We already have that authorization. This is simply to allow us to lease it for longer than 3 years, which is all we're allowed to do by Mass General Law. And so in order for any entity to want to invest in the building, they'd want to be able to have the opportunity to have it for more than 3 years. And so that's what this is. So the final terms of the lease are still being finalized, but this is seen as a critical authorization that we need to be able to finish the process of negotiating the lease. And so those questions are still being answered, but if we don't have authority to go longer than 3 years, the answers would be different. Because then the investments, they may not be interested in making those investments, and then the whole economics of the lease would have to change.
But if this was approved, the authority to, for any lease terms would be up to the select board. So, I mean, if the finance committee and the town meeting, more importantly, say we vote to authorize a long-term lease of these two properties, technically, could the select board say, well, we're willing to subsidize that lease also, not to get payments, but we can make payments? Like what sort of restrictions would there be on lease terms with any tenant?
That wouldn't be a town meeting decision, or that's not what we're asking town meeting. We're just asking town meeting for the ability to enter into a lease longer than 3 years.
No, but if subsequent to that, if the town meeting said yes, where would the terms of that lease be determined? Like, would the select board
Yes, the
and
select
the town
board.
manager simply have the authority to do that?
Yeah, so I oversee all the buildings, and this is a building the town owns, so it's under my control, but the select board I would go to the select board for the lease arrangement before it's implemented. And if the town meeting said no, for example, then we would just work within the framework that we have to, which is a 3-year lease, and it would just be harder to get a tenant.
I mean, I think one consideration we would want to have is, because technically the commuter lot subsidizing this debt that purchases property is taking away from the commuter lot being benefited. And if a new tenant moved in, we would be indirectly losing, that the commuters would lose access to that through the commuter lot fund. And so, I mean, one consideration for recommending this article would be to have as part of the lease that they cover the debt service that's associated with it. And I don't think the terms of that onerous at all, but it would be some de minimis amount of payment that would make the commuter lot fund whole.
I got a little confused in what you were saying. The commuters are losing access to what with this
Well,
rental?
they're losing the benefits of the funds that they pay to park on the lot, because those funds are now paying off the debt that was used to purchase this property, of which a tenant would get benefits of.
But even if no one's in there, the commuter lot is paying.
Correct.
So this is sort of,
Oh, sure, but if there's a tenant in it, why not have a tenant who could pay off the debt for the property itself?
So if I understand correctly, you're just trying to add the stipulation that the amount of money we make on it more than covers what we're paying for it in debt?
Yeah, so the actual debt service is $84,000 a year or whatever it was in 2023. I'm simply saying the commuters could be made whole by requiring that a lease, longer term or otherwise, cover that payment because technically the commuters fund purchased the property, although the town technically owns it, et cetera, et cetera.
I hear you, and I think it might be a little like other situations. I think we maybe are a little stuck on there not being actual language in here. As I understand it, the town is simply asking for the
Yes.
right to do a 10-year lease.
Or a long-term lease, which
Yes.
would be 10 years, I think. in
And it
most
has
cases.
nothing to do with who's in it or where that money goes.
Correct, but by authorizing this, we would lose, the finance committee would lose any ability to have a say-so, and that it would be strictly up to the select board to determine whatever conditions the building would be leased under. And again, the commuters who park in the lot, numbers may grow, they may shrink, they may et cetera, like let's hypothetically say commuters don't use the lot at all anymore. I mean, obviously the town would step in and likely make those payments because I think they're all going to the town of Acton under the town's borrowing anyway, not the commuter lot borrowing. But I don't think I'm being cute. I'm just saying is the town technically is, the commuters are losing $80,000 worth of improvements to their property through the fund. But it's also used to subsidize the transportation fund and so on and so forth. So I mean, I'm just being a little particular about lease terms, not picking up the debt service on this.
So the commuter lot is an enterprise fund, effectively.
Yeah, so, but there's
Its
also
own
the
thing.
Transportation Enterprise Fund, which has been
Well-
subsidized by the commuter lot. So it's,
No, but do revenues, this is from a property kind of owned by, like you said, the debt payments come out of.
oh, yeah, it's
That
all one,
enterprise fund.
it's all the town to a large extent.
But is there is revenue into the enterprise fund. Would the revenue from these properties go into the enterprise fund, or they just coincidentally are on this?
Yeah,
Same land.
so until we own, so before we own this property, we had the big parking lot on the other side and a few other spots. When we bought this lot, we were able to provide reserved parking, where parkers paid a premium to have a guaranteed spot right on the inbound side. And that generated revenue, which covered the lease. The building is used for storage. And the ambulance company. And so the board and the town wanted to have a more productive use of that space, potentially generate economic, if not income, then economic activity, people. And the proposals that we received, none of them would have covered our annual lease payments.
Oh, really?
Our annual debt payments. So that would just throw the whole process out if that was going to be a condition of the approval.
Okay.
The parking revenue is what's used to pay those debt payments. And just by leasing that space, we would not lose the ability to generate that parking revenue, assuming people want to park. Which I was there today, that lot itself, there was about 6 or 7 cars there, but there's 40-plus spaces. So once those people come back, that'll help cover us.
Yeah, and, there's a surplus for sure. I mean, it was 135,000 of revenue that the lot generated last year versus 84,000 of debt service or something like that. So, no, I didn't know that. I guess my assumption was the lease would be more than adequate to cover that. So I guess it's an issue in any case. Well, then maybe we could just suggest the select board, factor this into their thought process and the town manager when constructing a lease.
Factor directing the lease income towards the debt?
No, I mean, it doesn't sound like that's, would cover it. So I guess it's kind of a moot point.
Okay. Do Do you want to make a motion?
Motion that we recommend Article 14, authorize long-term lease at 19 and 21 Maple Street.
Second.
You got that, Scott?
I got it.
Wonderful. Please lead us through a vote.
All right. I'll start with you, Dave.
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Christie?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Roland?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And I agree.
Okay, we've already done that. Next, tax increment financing, so we're going to skip over the citizens petition. Also, that is Christine. Steve, we're up to you. Oh, no, not the last two, but you have two collective bargaining agreement articles. And we're going to discuss those next time. Roland, how about the amending the town charter regarding the Historic District Commission?
Yeah, vote to recommend. What they're doing is they're just adding another person to it. So they're going from 6 members to 7 members, which you should have 7 members. You should have an odd number because you don't end in a deadlock that way. And with 6 members, you very much can end in a deadlock with 3 against 3 and nothing gets accomplished, right? It's kind of like Congress. So I figured that, so, well, it's probably not that bad, but I motion to recommend
Second.
the amended town charter for the Historic District Commission.
Okay, any discussion? Wonderful, thank you. Scott, could you please take us through the vote?
Yes. Dave?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Christie?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Roland?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
All right, thank you. We are now looking at next week, addressing a list of articles that I will send out. It includes all of the zoning bylaw articles. We'll get someone in to discuss with us the dog park, CPC article. Apart from that, I believe we have done everything with the exception of the budget transfer, which we will not discuss until there's an actual.
So our next meeting is next week.
We will not discuss that at the next meeting, thank you. Our next meeting is next week at 6:30, I think is the correct time before the special town meeting.
I'll ask CPC to present. I'll ask CPC to come in that night.
No,
No,
No?
that's a special town.
no,
meeting.
that's the meeting right before the special town meeting.
Oh, okay.
On their meeting on
yes.
April 23rd is the next meeting.
5:23,
I was
thank you.
incorrectly referring to.
4:23, thank you.
It's a shame Christine wasn't here tonight because the gas-powered leaf blower phase-out is one of only 2 two articles that my neighbors have come and yelled at me about.
Well, my neighbors too. So I've been,
We are actually neighbors.
oh, that's true. It's the same neighbors. Never mind.
Okay, that is it for our current. Hi, John, please.
Hi, just an offer. I'm not sure if you're trying to wrap up, but I do have time, and I'm perfectly willing and able to go through the capital articles. I know one member is not here tonight that was going to present on that, if that's helpful to folks. It is capital, the capital projects that I presented when the Finance Committee approved the budget a few weeks ago.
Okay.
So I'm happy to go through that if there's time, otherwise.
That one's mine, and the reason why I was unprepared to move forward with it, because I thought in one of the late phases of the late phases of the ALG agreement, you pulled out some money for the replacement of the fleet replacement vehicle for the police. I don't know if that actually changed your number from a capital perspective, or if you just found money elsewhere in your budget to make that adjustment.
No, so at the meeting that I presented the budget, or the budget hearing, rather, that the Finance Committee held last month, I went through the capital list, and it was as it appears here.
Correct. And then at the last ALG meeting, the last ALG meeting I went to, because I missed the very last ALG meeting, my apologies for that. I had asked you to pull out $40,000 as well as a $200,000 for vacancy factor, and that was agreed to. I am aware of the fact that since it's a bottom line budget, you could have pulled the money from elsewhere. I was just surprised to see that the same amount of money, I wanted to make sure that it was, if this was the same amount of money that you indeed had pulled elsewhere, or that if you had backed on the number of vehicles that you were planning on replacing in this coming year, because that was a distinct ask at the ALG meeting.
Okay, I find that to be a much different discussion than what's before the Finance Committee tonight, and it's something that the Finance Committee has already voted to support. But the vehicle replacement schedule hasn't changed. The budget did get reduced from one ALG meeting to another.
Okay.
But the one that you missed, and then the Finance Committee meeting that you missed, I think that had already been discussed and supported, I believe, by the Finance Committee. So I didn't know that we were going to go backwards on that one.
Okay, so the money came out, but you did not commit to changing the fleet, they did not commit to changing the number of police vehicles to be replaced, but you did find the subsequent amount of money that I had asked for to be pulled from elsewhere in your bottom line budget. Is that an accurate assessment of what happened?
Well, we reduced the budget by, between the 8th and 9th budget presentations, we reduced the budget an additional amount with the funding that we were able to save from health insurance and from our debt management strategy. So in those two areas, we reduced the budget, and that was a budget that the Finance Committee approved. So, and the fleet improvement program hadn't changed. You may be confusing the A and B budgets, but that's all we're talking, all that's in here is the A budget.
Jason, you made specific requests for where the money come from. The money came from other places in the budget.
Okay, so what I just said is accurate, that the money was removed from bottom line, but not
Yes.
removed from this specific purpose.
Yes.
Okay, then I will bite my tongue.
We have discussed these items.
I'm not happy with it, so I'm just gonna, I'll let someone else move it, because I'm not happy with it. We were talking about Article 5, Town Capital, Public Works, Public Safety, and Public Celebrations. There are parts of this that I think are absolutely mandatory, and I'm happy to move forward. I thought we'd made some movement elsewhere, but the overall budget was reduced, so I guess I shouldn't be particularly upset at where it came from.
All right, then I'll move that we recommend Article 5, Town Capital, Public Works, Public Safety,
Second.
and Public Celebration.
Scott, would you please lead us through a vote?
Yes, that was motion by Jason and
Steve.
Steve, and
Dave
seconded.
motioned.
Steve made the
And we
motion, Greg seconded.
Thank you. All right, so Dave,
Maybe come back to me.
okay, I'll go backwards then. Roland,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Jason,
Nay.
Christie,
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
Dave, are you ready?
Yeah, I abstain.
Abstain.
I believe that passes.
Four.
Scott has to declare his vote.
Yes, I guess I will agree to this. So that's 5-4, 1 no, and 1 abstain.
I said a lot, too, thank you. I am currently encouraging us to ask questions of the town manager, since he is available at this time, such that we can have a shorter discussion when Christine is available at our next meeting. We have discussed many of these articles. This includes replacement of the ladder truck, the intersection at Prospect Street, and some Great Road sidewalks, stormwater infrastructure, and the DPW facility improvement. Regarding, I'm sorry, the fueling station replacement. Regarding that, John, has there been any indication from the school or from Case about helping to pay for it? How much?
Yes, both organizations have expressed, are willing to participate in the improvement project. The exact specific details are still being finalized, but they both use this facility and rely on this facility, and will be contributing to it to help us offset the cost of this investment.
Okay. Anyone else? I think we're getting, yes, please.
John, I apologize, and I have asked this, and I appreciate you presenting or reviewing this material with us again. What is the life remaining of the existing fuel depot? How many years left is there?
My understanding is that we're at the end of its useful life, like next year. I think it's either a 20 or a 30-year tanks, and we're either the 20th or the 30th year. I can't remember which, but we're nearing the end. And so to get this project going would allow us to have infrastructure in place that's compliant.
And this will take years, obviously, to build this facility, likely or a year or two from when it's approved?
I don't think it would take more than a year once it's approved, yeah.
What would be done in between, like with the end of the life of the existing facility and before this one would ramp up to be used?
We maintain it and we inspect it and we continue to make sure that it's operating safely. But if there's a project that's breaking ground on the other side of the parking lot, there'll be some relief that we don't have to go through the trouble of replacing an underground storage tank or something more substantial that would be a major investment on very old equipment.
Oh, and this is above ground?
Yes.
Sorry if I missed that. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, this one just gives me a little bit of pause because it's a bigger dollar item. We talked about alternatives for this, and I appreciate that some of them aren't really feasible. The sort of temporary structure, I don't know if we had made any progress on that, but I'm just not as sure on this one, so I'm just talking out loud. Thanks.
Roland?
Thanks, John. For the fueling stations, they already know where they're going to place that on the site.
Yeah, the location is closer to Forest Road. So it's actually kind of where the vans park now, if you've ever been on the site where the transportation vans park overnight.
Coming on Forest,
If you're coming in from Forest, it would be on your left.
Yeah.
And so that's an area where, right now, it's centrally located right in the middle of the site. So
Yeah, I know where it
as
is now.
school buses are trying to get fueled up and plow trucks are trying to get salt, it's right in the middle of it all. So from an operations standpoint, moving it over there is going to be a big improvement alone, regardless of the fueling.
So they already have somebody lined up, so when town meeting gives their approval, they can start preparing the site and getting the contractor in there to bringing the tanks and all that stuff.
Yes, we're very far along in the design, and then we would just need to finish the final design and bid it out to get a contractor, yes.
Thank you.
I believe I heard that this will be off to the side such that when the DPW larger project happens, this is out of the way. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's another benefit of doing this first, is that it gets it out of the way of anything that we do with the existing facility.
So this won't be disturbed, and it will, in some ways, facilitate that other project, not having it be in the middle.
I think that we could replace the fuel depot and not do anything else out there. It certainly is a standalone project, but it's envisioned as part of the larger improvement of the site, which is very much necessary.
All right, thank you.
Maybe unrelated, was just the Maple Street property, you talked about the leasing it. Is there any thought given to selling those properties? I mean, what's the idea of the town maintaining ownership of them? Is there like a longer-term vision for them, or are they just like any tenant who would want the property? Sounded like you had multiple parties interested.
This is the Maple Street property?
Yeah, sorry, the Gordon Richards property.
We hadn't discussed selling them. We just bought them a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
or maybe 2.5 years ago. And I think with the intent of providing more parking, and even though there was a suspension temporarily in the demand for that parking, I believe it still exists.
Okay.
And so the intent of the purchase is still, I believe, to be in line with what the town wants us to do. And the board asked us to try to find a more productive use of the buildings rather than just storage.
But
And
to
so
hold
that's what-
on to it until that demand for parking returns at some point. Is that what you're?
I think we own the building, we own the parking lots. They generate revenue from parking. If we were to sell them, at some point, we were going to wish that we had them again. And so I'm not sure, unless there was a specific opportunity to do so, we would bring it to the board, but that hasn't been presented.
And just last question on that, and I'm done, is there's no chance the town would spend more money on those properties at this point, right? Like, there wouldn't be a tenant who would ask the town to fund some renovations and then say, then we'll lease the property from you. And then the town wants to invest 200 grand in the property or 500 grand in the property.
If that scenario was presented, it's not part of the lease that we're looking at right now. We wouldn't have that funding. We'd have to
Okay.
ask town meeting for that, or ask somebody for that.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Sean. That's all of the articles. At this point, we've pushed off everything else. Scott, were you, oh, I'm sorry, John, yes?
I think, I just thought we were in the middle of Article 6 and we just kicked back to another one. I didn't know if we could
Oh, I'm
finish,
sorry.
finish Article 6.
Did we vote on Article 6? No, we decided, we're putting off, thank you. You were providing information to hopefully speed up our next discussion, after which we will vote on Article 6. That and the rest of the articles will hopefully get done at our April, not August 23rd meeting. They will not be, they will be marked as deferred in the warrant, just to make sure.
Chair Anderson, what time would you like the meeting to start on the 23rd?
Thank you, that was going to be my next point.
Okay.
Would we like to start earlier? I know, maybe at 6:30 on. I can ask about 6:30. You're saying 6:30 is too early for you?
Madam Chair, 6:30 is a little too early for me, but I'd be fine with 7 o'clock start,
Okay.
which is better than our 7:30 start.
Okay, just 7 o'clock for everyone? Scott, does that work for you, 7 o'clock? Wonderful. So we will do 7 o'clock on the 23rd. Meanwhile, we will meet, well, do we think there's value at meeting before the town meeting next Wednesday?
No.
We're waiting on you to vocalize your thought process.
My
or the
thought
results.
process is it's not a bad idea for us to be there in case something happens out of nowhere. But I definitely don't want to do it at 6. I think 6:30 is reasonable. The only other reason why I might want 6:30 is if people wanted to run through what I'm going to, because you've asked me to speak to this topic. if people wanted to hear preview of what I had to say, or if you'd rather, Madam Chair, you can bless what I have to say, and then we can just meet at 6:50 and be good to go.
Do people want to hear what Jason has to say beforehand?
Steve says no. Let's do 6:50.
Okay. Let's meet up on stage. We will not have a formal meeting before
What time does town meeting start?
7. So,
at 6:45 on stage.
yes, make sure to get there by 6:45. Again, we're not meeting to have a formal meeting. We are simply all going to be there in order to get settled and have our seats at the high school on the stage.
On roller skates.
That would be ugly.
Frightening.
Okay, moving on to committee business. We have no minutes to review currently. Are there any liaison reports? No? Okay, we have confirmed our next 2 meeting dates. I'm sorry. Again, there will be a meeting on May 1st if necessary. And I believe that's it.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Scott, would you please lead us through a vote?
Yes. Greg,
Yes.
Christie,
Yes.
Jason,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Roland,
Aye.
and I am an aye.
Thank you, Scott. Could you please send me, the votes and all of that information? Thank you. And I will see
I
you all
will.
6:45 at the high school on stage next Wednesday. We are adjourned.
All right. Hasta luego.